Chosen one, something is happening right now that may not look the way you think it does. There is an emergency in heaven, but not the kind that signals disaster. It is the kind that happens when something has shifted on a massive scale, so precise and so personal that the signal can no longer be delayed. This is not a message of fear. It is a message about movement already set into motion with your name attached to it. You sensed it before you understood it. You felt it when the season you were living in suddenly became too small. When what once fit your life no longer seemed to fit at all. Some mornings you woke up carrying a pressure in your chest that had no clear explanation. You called it anxiety, restlessness, maybe even the beginning of everything falling apart. But what felt like collapse was actually the beginning of arrival. Stay with me for a moment, because I have seen too many people receive one of the most important signals of their lives and mistake it for their darkest season. The urgency you have been carrying is not proof that something is wrong. It is evidence that something significant is already moving, and it is moving on your behalf rather than against you. That distinction changes everything about how you respond to the days ahead. This message is not coming to confront you. It is coming to reach you. The emergency God has called is not a sign of failure. It is the mark of a divine work unfolding beneath the surface, arranging what human effort could never arrange, closing what needed to close so the right things could open. What looks like chaos to the natural eye can be recognized by the Spirit as precision. There is a reason this message found you now instead of months ago. There is a reason something inside you paused and recognized it. That pull is not random. The same Spirit that led you here is involved in a movement greater than anything you can currently see. But if you misunderstand this season, you may start moving in the wrong direction. You may try to repair what was never broken, or stop what was never meant to stop. You may mistake divine movement for divine abandonment, and that misunderstanding can cost you the very momentum meant to carry you forward. From where you stand, this kind of heavenly emergency looks like pressure without a clear source. It looks like unexpected doors closing while others remain open, despite every attempt to shut them. It looks like relationships ending without explanation and provision, arriving at the last possible moment. It looks like lying awake in the middle of the night and feeling silence in prayer so deeply that you begin to wonder if you have been forgotten. But this is not abandonment. It is the movement of something too large to shift gently. When a river changes course, the landscape around it changes too. What was familiar gives way to something new. From the viewpoint of a stone resting in the riverbed, it may seem as if everything has broken apart. But from above, the river is simply finding the path it was always meant to follow. You are not the stone being crushed. You are the river itself. What feels like disruption may actually be the sound of your life moving into the channel prepared for it long ago. If something in these words feels familiar, do something right now. Type the words, "The alarm is ringing," in the comments below. Not because you have to, but because this moment deserves a witness. Sometimes naming what you have been carrying brings clarity, and that clarity may help you hear the rest of this message more clearly. Now let me show you why this season feels so confusing, because the confusion is not accidental, and neither is the timing. There is something many messages never mention. The kind of urgency you are feeling is experienced by a specific kind of person. Not everyone wakes up carrying this weight. Not everyone feels this pressure. Those who do often assume something is wrong, when in reality they may be closer than they realize. Think about what happens when an airplane approaches its destination. The pressure changes. The altitude shifts. To someone who does not understand what is happening, it can feel uncomfortable. But it is not danger. It is a sign that arrival is near. You have been feeling that shift. You are not in danger. You are descending towards something. And because this season deserves more than comfort, I want to speak with precision. Comfort without understanding can delay a breakthrough. My goal is not simply to help you endure this season. It is to help you recognize it for what it is. There is a pattern I have seen repeatedly in the lives of people carrying a significant calling. I call it the pressure before the passage. It is more than a metaphor. It is a recognizable pattern. Every major transition is preceded by a season of compression. Things often become tighter before they expand. Resources seem smaller before they increase. Relationships thin out before new ones arrive. Vision becomes blurry before greater clarity emerges. This is not coincidence. It is a pattern older than any of us. The signs are familiar. You feel urgency inside, yet struggle to act. You know something must change, but you cannot identify exactly what. You pray, but you are uncertain what is returning. You look at your current reality, and it does not seem to match what you know you were meant to become. The gap between where you are and where you believe you should be may feel larger than ever. Many people interpret that feeling as failure. They convince themselves the plan is not working, that God has moved on, or that the calling was never real. Slowly, they begin building their lives around a smaller version of themselves, because the larger vision feels too distant to keep believing in. Yet heaven grieves that decision, because the door was never closed. The door remained right in front of them. They simply turned around because the hallway became dark. The pressure you feel is not proof that expansion has stopped. It is often the condition that makes expansion possible. Think about what happens before birth. Pressure increases, space narrows, the process itself feels intense, yet that very pressure is part of what brings new life forward. What appears from the outside to be a crisis is often the process of something being completed. What you have been calling an emergency may actually be a contraction phase. You have been in this season long enough that your faith has been shaped by it. This level of pressure produces strength that cannot be formed any other way. You are not weaker because of what you have endured. You have been prepared with greater precision for what lies ahead. The years behind you have not simply been years of loss. They have been years of formation. Compression has been doing the work that preparation required. You are not behind schedule. You are ready. That is the first diagnosis, and it matters because it changes how you see everything that follows. Consider the life of Joseph. At 17, he received a dream far larger than the world around him could contain. It carried a sense of purpose that was impossible to ignore, even before he fully understood it. Then everything seemed to unravel. He was betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and later imprisoned because of a lie. From the bottom of that pit, Joseph could not see what God was doing. What looked like an interruption to the dream was actually the road leading toward it. Every betrayal, every humiliation, every year of waiting was shaping him for a responsibility he would never have been ready to carry at 17. The suffering was not punishment. It was preparation of a depth that only suffering could produce. When Pharaoh received a dream that no one else could explain, there was only one man in Egypt prepared for that moment. It was not because Joseph was fortunate. It was because every hardship, every betrayal, and every season he endured had equipped him for exactly what that moment would require. The pit was never his final destination. The assignment determined the preparation. And the greater the assignment, the more the preparation resembles a process most people would never willingly choose. Not because God is harsh, but because some things cannot be developed in comfort. They have to be forged through experience. This brings us to the second layer of what may be happening in your current season. What feels like resistance to your calling may actually be training for it. I call this the formation forge. The clearer your sense becomes that something significant is ahead, the more your present circumstances can seem to push in the opposite direction. Part of you senses the assignment, yet another part feels surrounded by obstacles. Your faith may be growing while your finances seem stuck. Your sense of purpose becomes sharper, yet the doors you expected to open remain closed. You ask God for clarity and find yourself facing more waiting instead. Many people see this tension as proof that something is wrong. They ask, if this calling is real, why does everything feel like opposition? That question has trapped many people because it assumes opposition and formation are the same thing. From the inside, they often look identical. The pressure created by an attack can feel very similar to the pressure created by a forge. You cannot always tell the difference by how it feels. The difference becomes clear when you look at where it is leading, and despite what circumstances may suggest, the direction is not downward. The path has been moving upward all along. What looked like setbacks may actually have been adjustments in altitude. What looked like closed doors may have been redirection happening faster than your own timeline could comfortably process. Sometimes what feels like collision is actually course correction. If you are still listening and something in these words keeps holding your attention, even when they touch a place that feels uncomfortable, type these words in the comments. I am in the forge. The people who stay present when the reflection becomes difficult are often the ones who most need to hear what is being said. Before we go further, I want to place a question in front of you that we will return to later. Over the last several years, researchers have discovered something that many people concerned with these kinds of questions have never heard about. Not because it opposes what is sacred, but because it emerged from a place most people have not been looking. A group of scientists, led by a physician in New York, spent years studying a question that may sound familiar. Why does spiritual clarity seem strong in some seasons and strangely distant in others? Their findings point to something many spiritually sensitive people have sensed but struggled to explain. For now, simply hold this question. What if the fog that settles over a person during a critical season is not evidence of spiritual distance or personal failure? What if it is a specific condition with a specific cause and a specific solution? Keep that question in mind. We will return to it. Right now, I want to explore a deeper layer beneath the symptoms. There is a root issue that often goes unnamed, and until it is recognized, most solutions only manage the problem rather than transform it. I have seen this happen repeatedly during important stages of formation. Often just as an assignment is nearing activation, something inside a person begins working against what they are meant to receive. It is not always an outside force. Sometimes it is something formed over years of disappointment, years of waiting, and years of standing close to something that never seemed to arrive. I call this receiver attrition. The pattern is simple but powerful. You know what you are hoping to receive. You can sense its reality, yet the part of you that receives has been worn down over time, one disappointment after another, until it operates at only a fraction of its intended capacity. Think of a radio left in harsh conditions for years. The station is still broadcasting. The signal has not disappeared, but the receiver has degraded, making the transmission seem weaker than it really is. The person holding the radio keeps turning up the volume, trying harder and harder to hear. They increase their effort. They pray more. They do everything they know how to do. Yet the issue is not with the signal. The issue is with the receiver. That is often the deeper cause beneath the urgency many people have been carrying. It is not that God has stopped speaking. The transmission has not weakened. The promise is not smaller than it was years ago. What was prepared for you has not changed. The challenge is that the receiver has weathered so many storms that it is struggling to operate at the level the next chapter requires. Before explaining what that means, I want you to notice something important. The fact that you recognize a gap between what is being sent and what you are receiving is significant. The fact that you sense something is not landing the way it should is itself a sign. Awareness reveals that the receiver is still alive. It may be diminished, but diminished is not the same as destroyed. What has been diminished can be restored. You are not beyond recovery. In fact, you may be closer to understanding what is happening than you realize. The word diminished matters here. It means the original capacity still exists. It has not been removed. No mistake, failure, or difficult season erased what God placed within you. The pressure of years may have compressed that capacity, but it did not eliminate it. The Hebrew word for this kind of shaping is yatsar, the same word used when God formed humanity from the earth. The pressure is not punishment. It is formation. What has felt like a reduction in your ability to receive may actually be the hand of the potter continuing his work. The waiting did not break you, it shaped you. You have not become less of who you were meant to be. you have become more precisely formed for what comes next. The process has refined you in ways you may not yet fully see. There is a passage in Malachi that speaks of a messenger being sent ahead. The reason is simple. The person who arrives at fulfillment is not the same person who began the journey. The one who receives the promise has been prepared to carry it. The process has formed them into someone capable of holding what is coming. God has been shaping you through everything you have lived through. The person you are today, marked by every season, every struggle, and every lesson, is the very person the next chapter has been preparing for. This emergency is not telling you that you are too late. It is telling you that the shaping has been taking place, that the preparation has been real, and that something new is approaching. Now we move from understanding the pattern to understanding what can actually be done with that knowledge. Recognizing the problem is important, but it is only the beginning. Many people understand these seasons of pressure perfectly and still remain stuck within them. The reason is simple. Information alone does not restore what has been worn down. There are specific conditions that bring restoration, and we are moving toward that discussion. Before we get there, I want to address something that may already be happening inside you. Perhaps when you heard the word diminished, you immediately began reviewing all the ways you think you contributed to it. Maybe you started remembering where you should have trusted more, prayed more, or handled things differently. That inner voice keeping track of every mistake is familiar. I have heard it in countless honest conversations. It feels convincing, but it does not tell the whole truth. While choices matter, the reduction in your ability to receive was not primarily caused by personal failure. It was often the result of accumulated pressure, unresolved pain, and the strain of carrying something heavy for too long without proper restoration. You did not fail your way into this condition. You carried your way into it. Those are two very different things. Part of you may still be skeptical. You may be thinking that you have heard encouragement before, only to watch it disappear a few days later. That skepticism is understandable. It is not weakness. It is what develops when hope has repeatedly met disappointment. What I am describing is not simply a different way of thinking. It is not a mindset adjustment or a motivational idea. It is a mechanism. But before discussing restoration, there is one more pattern that needs to be understood, because solutions are only useful when the full problem has been clearly identified. Over time, many people in extended seasons of formation develop what I call endurance substitution. After waiting longer than they thought possible, they slowly replace receptivity with survival. Instead of asking what they are meant to receive, they begin asking how they can simply make it through another day. Instead of looking for provision, they focus on protecting what little remains. Expansion gives way to contraction. What began as a survival response slowly starts feeling like wisdom. Yet it is not wisdom. It is adaptation to a diminished condition. This is one of the most subtle ways a temporary season becomes permanent. People tell themselves they just need to keep pushing forward, stay strong, and endure. But endurance by itself does not restore the receiver. It only teaches a person how to function with less than they were created to receive. Psychology has a term for part of this process: adaptive compression. When the nervous system experiences prolonged stress without relief, it reduces its openness as a form of protection. It is trying to preserve you, yet in protecting you, it can also limit the very receptivity required for what comes next. This is not your fault. It is not evidence of failure. It is a protective response that once served a purpose, but now needs to be released. The important thing to understand is that restoration does not depend on forcing yourself back into openness through sheer determination. You do not have to think your way back or push your way back. There are mechanisms within the human brain that researchers have documented, mechanisms connected to restoring a more synchronized and receptive state, a state many people naturally experienced in childhood before life narrowed and hardened their expectations. Think about childhood for a moment. As a child, you received experiences with openness. You did not constantly calculate whether belief was safe. You were not always bracing for disappointment. There was a natural capacity to receive, and science now understands that this state is not permanently lost. If you have been listening, and something inside you feels as though it is recognizing a truth it always sensed but could never fully explain, type these words in the comments. I receive what is mine. The posture this message is inviting you into is not passive waiting. It is restored receptivity. Now I want to speak to those who feel close to giving up, not those abandoning faith altogether, but those who still show up while quietly wondering whether they believe as strongly as they once did. If that describes you, listen carefully. The distance you feel between yourself and the promise is not necessarily a measure of spiritual reality. It may be a measure of the condition of the receiver. A radio does not tell you how strong the broadcast is. It reveals how effectively it is receiving the signal. When a radio becomes damaged, it reports silence, even when the transmission remains strong. In the same way, the silence you have been sensing is not evidence that God has withdrawn. It may simply be evidence that something within the receiver needs restoration. Before we move into the solution, there is one more pattern worth naming. I have seen it repeatedly in people who are approaching an important breakthrough. As they draw closer, a specific type of pressure often increases. Clarity becomes harder to maintain. Distractions become more frequent, and voices around them begin offering alternatives that sound reasonable but feel strangely limiting. This is not coincidence. It is often a sign of proximity. Resistance tends to intensify as arrival approaches, not because you are losing ground, but because something important is drawing near. The real question is not whether you are still standing. You are still here. The question is whether you arrive with your capacity to receive restored. Whether you walk through the next door able to fully receive what has been prepared for you. Earlier, I asked you to hold a question about discoveries made through scientific research. We are coming back to that now because it connects what many people experience internally with something that has been observed and studied. When those pieces come together, they explain things that often seem impossible to understand. At this point, you know something you may not have known before. You know that the pressure you've been feeling is not evidence that God has stepped away. You know that pressure before breakthrough is often part of the process itself. You know that the forge of formation is not punishment, but preparation. You also know that receiver attrition is real. The gap between what is being transmitted and what is being received is not necessarily a reflection of your standing with God. It may simply reflect a system that has been under strain and now needs restoration. You know that survival and receiving are not the same thing. The survival posture that helped you endure difficult seasons may have been necessary then, but it is not designed for what is coming next. What carried you through one season may not be what carries you into the next. The truth holding all of this together is simple. You have not fallen behind your calling. The calling has been shaping you from within, even while outward circumstances looked delayed. You are not late. You have been deepened. The depth formed through years of pressure is the very depth the next chapter requires. That is what you understand now. That is the reason, the process, and the person you have become through it. The person who carries this understanding into the next few minutes of this message is already seeing things differently than when they first began listening. You can now recognize what has been standing in the way. The mechanism is visible. The door is no longer hidden. The question that remains is how to open it without placing more strain on a system that has already been exhausted by effort. The truth is that effort alone does not restore a receiver. When you were a child, your ability to receive was not at its strongest because of what you were doing. It was strong because certain burdens had not yet fallen on it. Restoration is not about demanding more from yourself. It is about applying the right mechanism in the right place. That mechanism is not more discipline, more output, or another practice that depends entirely on willpower. It is not simply a mindset or a program to maintain. What restores the mind's synchronized receiving state is a specific intervention that has been documented neurologically. and what I am about to describe approaches the issue from a scientific direction rather than a spiritual one. In 1981, a discovery was made that earned the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine. Working with split-brain patients, Dr. Roger Sperry challenged long-held assumptions about how the mind functions. His research demonstrated that the brain is not designed to operate as a single isolated channel, but as two hemispheres functioning together in synchronized cooperation. Researchers now refer to this synchronized condition as whole brain activation. It is not a mystical idea but a measurable neurological state. In that condition, creativity, intuition, receptivity, and problem-solving abilities become more fully available. What especially captured researchers' attention was what they discovered when studying young children. They found that 98% of children under the age of 5 naturally functioned in this highly synchronized state. It was their default condition. When adults were studied, however, fewer than 1 in 1,000 maintained the same level of synchronization. The difference was not caused by lack of intelligence or spirituality, but by years of stress, comparison, and unresolved emotional strain. The capacity itself was not removed. The connection had simply been disrupted. Many people sense this intuitively. They remember a time when life felt brighter, clearer, and more open than it does now. That feeling is not necessarily nostalgia. It may reflect a genuine change that occurred over time. I want to share a few examples, not as proof, but as information. Proof ultimately comes from personal experience. One woman described years of trying every practice she could find: prayer, journaling, meditation, and more. She believed the principles, but struggled to experience them deeply in daily life. She explained that it felt as though the signal was reaching her, but she could not fully hold it. After 10 days with what I am about to describe, she felt something shift. A blockage seemed to clear, not because she pushed harder, but because the receiver itself had improved. Another man described a similar experience. For years, he had carried responsibilities for everyone around him while becoming increasingly disconnected within himself. Prayer had begun to feel like speaking into silence. Yet after 2 weeks, he described a noticeable return of clarity, focus, and spiritual responsiveness. According to him, the fog that had become normal simply lifted. His ability to make decisions improved. His sense of connection returned, not because his faith changed, but because the instrument through which he experienced it had been restored. That leads to the work of a neuroscience team led by Dr. Daniel Barron in New York. After years of study, they condensed more than an hour of clinical neural synchronization technology into an 8-minute audio sequence. The protocol is simple: 8 minutes a day, with headphones and closed eyes. They call it the Genius Switch. It is not presented as a meditation app, a mood-enhancing frequency, or a brainwave product. It is described as a targeted audio sequence designed around research associated with whole brain synchronization, with the goal of restoring the integrated state that is often seen in early childhood. The program is intended for people who feel they have spent years pursuing what they believed they were called to do, yet still sense a persistent fog standing between them and what they are trying to receive. It is built around the idea that the issue may not be personal weakness, but a condition that can be addressed. Many people will hear about something like this and move on. They have accepted their reduced capacity as permanent. Yet, if you are still listening, perhaps something in you is unwilling to settle for that conclusion. Let me explain what access to it looks like. Similar clinical neurofeedback sessions can cost hundreds of dollars per hour, while home equipment designed to approximate those experiences can cost thousands. According to those familiar with the research, the value could easily justify a much higher price. Instead, the program was released at a significantly lower cost so that more people could access it. Through the support link in the description, it is currently available at a discounted price. The package also includes several bonus resources focused on visualization, mental clarity, foundational teachings on receptivity, and practical daily habits. Everything included is backed by a full money-back guarantee. Whether you use it once or many times, if it does not deliver the value promised, a refund is available without unnecessary complications. The underlying idea is simple. What God has already placed within reach may become easier to recognize when the receiver is functioning as intended. The provision itself has not changed. The ability to recognize and receive it is what is being restored. One thing worth mentioning directly is that many products online use similar language and terminology. According to the creators, what distinguishes this particular system is the specific mechanism behind it. They maintain that the complete method is available only through the official source linked in the description. If what has been shared resonates with you, you can review the details through the support link in the description before making any decision. Everything is presented there for you to examine carefully and at your own pace. There is also something important to remember. No tool replaces God. No program replaces the work this season has been accomplishing in your life. It does not do the surrendering for you, nor does it determine which doors open or close. What God is doing remains independent of any instrument. The idea being presented is simply that a restored receiver may be better able to engage with what God is already doing. The source has not changed. The vessel is what is being strengthened. As we return to the deeper message, I want to leave this thought with you. If something stirred in you during the discussion about the mind and receptivity, the information remains available through the support link in the description. It may seem like a small step, but small steps taken from a restored place can influence an entire season. And the season ahead deserves to be met by the fullest version of who you have become. You have been listening long enough that I want to pause and recognize something. The people still here at this point are usually not casual listeners. They are people who felt something resonate deeply and could not simply move on from it. If that describes you, type these words in the comments. I claim this now. Choosing to receive instead of continuing in survival mode is not a small decision. It is the posture this next season was meant to meet. Now I want to address the question many people carry after a long season of formation. Not the spiritual question or the theological question, but the practical one. You may be thinking, I hear what you are saying. I believe there is truth in it, but what do I actually do tomorrow morning? What do I do with the gap that still exists between where I am and where I feel called to be? What do you do with opportunities that have not arrived, relationships that remain unresolved, or provision that still feels incomplete? The most important answer I can offer is this. The space between diagnosis and fulfillment is not empty, it is active. What you do in that space matters because it shapes how you arrive when the breakthrough comes. Stop treating this season as a waiting room and start seeing it as a preparation room. Those are two very different environments. In a waiting room, you focus on how long you have been there. In a preparation room, you focus on what is being developed within you while you are there. That distinction is important because the posture you carry into a breakthrough affects what you are able to receive from it. Some people reach the edge of a new season, exhausted, still operating from survival mode. As a result, they receive only a fraction of what was available, not because more was withheld, but because they could only carry what they were prepared to hold. Stop asking when and begin asking what. Asking when often ties you to a timeline you cannot control. Asking what keeps you engaged with the work happening inside you right now. One creates anxiety. The other creates participation. That participation helps preserve the receiver while heaven continues its work. And that leads to another important point. The weight of unanswered prayer. Many of you have prayed sincerely. You have brought the same requests before God again and again. Over time, the burden of not yet seeing those prayers fulfilled can settle beneath everything else you carry. Often people arrive at one of two conclusions. They assume either that God chose a different path or that their faith somehow fell short. Both explanations place the answer behind them, but there is another way to look at it. There is a difference between a prayer that has not been answered and a provision that has not yet arrived. The answer may already be in motion. What remains is the condition needed for its arrival. including the condition of the receiver when it reaches you. Think of a specialized instrument prepared for an important procedure. The instrument is ready, but it remains where it is until the environment is prepared for its use. In the same way, the preparation of your inner life, including the restoration of your ability to receive, may be part of what is happening right now. You are not being ignored. You are being calibrated. The invitation is not simply to improve yourself, but to participate in restoration as an act of faith. Becoming the receiver that what is coming requires is not separate from faith. It is one expression of it. If something has begun to loosen inside you while listening to this message, type these words in the comments: I exit the waiting room. The posture is different now. You are no longer simply waiting for something to happen. You are preparing to receive what is already on its way. Before we close this part of the message, imagine a morning 6 months from now. You wake before the alarm. The room is familiar, but something feels different inside you. A weight you carried for so long that it became normal is no longer there. In its place is a quiet confidence, something steady that does not depend on outside confirmation. You realize that a part of you that had been operating below its full capacity has come back online. The difference is clear because you can now feel the contrast. You begin reaching toward the things that matter most: relationships, purpose, provision, creativity, and they no longer feel distant. Not because everything changed overnight, but because the receiver changed. The way you perceive, recognize, and experience those things has shifted. That future version of you is not fantasy. It is the natural result of restoration taking place. The distance between where you are now and where you could be is measured by the moment restoration begins. You carry the promise into a mind that has been recalibrated to receive it more deeply. Before moving forward, I want to invite you into a simple moment. If you are able, place your hand on your chest, not as a ritual, but as a way of becoming present to what is happening within you. What is being addressed right now goes deeper than thought alone. If possible, close your eyes for a moment. In the quiet, notice what your body has been carrying. Pay attention to any tension in your shoulders, tightness in your jaw, or pressure in the center of your chest. Simply notice it. You do not need to force anything to change. Awareness itself is often the beginning of release. Light does not struggle against darkness when it enters a room. It simply arrives and the darkness gives way. In the same way, something may already be beginning to soften and release right now. The bracing is beginning to loosen, and before anything else, I want to tell you how grateful I am for you. Grateful for the years you kept going, for the nights you chose faith when the facts around you gave you little reason to hope, and for the mornings you showed up again even when it seemed nothing was changing. That kind of perseverance, the quiet kind that does not seek recognition and does not give up, is one of the rarest qualities a person can carry. I want to release from you every false conclusion this long season may have convinced you to believe. Every time you interpreted delay as disqualification, every moment you mistook silence for abandonment, every occasion when you looked at what had not happened yet and decided it must mean something was wrong with you. Those conclusions were understandable, but they were not true. The forge was never a mistake. It was the environment required for the work being done within you. The calling required a certain kind of formation, and the formation required a certain kind of season. What you have walked through was not designed to destroy you. It was shaping you. You have endured what many would have walked away from. The long season did not make you less ready. It prepared you more deeply, and the restoration of your ability to receive is happening at the same time that something important is drawing near. If these words speak to what your soul has been carrying, type these words in the comments: I am the chosen one. And if what was shared earlier about the mind and the receiver resonated with you, the support link in the description remains available for you to explore further. This is the final mention of it. Now, let me prepare you for something that may happen after this message ends. There will likely come a moment when the emotional strength of this message fades and familiar pressure returns. You may hear that inner voice saying nothing has changed and that you were wise to protect yourself from hope. When that moment comes, remember that it is not proof this message was wrong. It is simply a test of whether the understanding has settled deeply enough to remain when the emotions quiet down. The answer is not chasing another emotional high. The answer is returning to what you now know. Return to the understanding that pressure before breakthrough is not punishment. Return to the truth that formation shapes rather than destroys. Return to the recognition that what God has arranged is not waiting for perfect circumstances. It is waiting for a receiver that is more fully open. Your part in that process is not heroic effort born from desperation. It is steady, grounded participation through small and consistent choices. You were never meant to function forever at reduced capacity. That was not the design. The original capacity still exists within you. What has been compressed can be restored. What has been carrying you through one season does not need to become a permanent burden. Let that weight begin to leave, not by force but by recognizing that it served a purpose for a season that is now coming to an end. It was protection, not identity. It helped you survive what was behind you, but it does not have to define what lies ahead. You are allowed to arrive at what is coming with less strain than you have carried. You are allowed to receive with open hands rather than hands still clenched from everything they have been holding. There is no rule that says you must carry yesterday's tension into tomorrow's season, so I speak clarity over the places where vision has felt blurred the longest. I speak restoration over the parts of you that have been compressed by the weight of the journey. I speak release over the protective patterns that once kept you safe but no longer need to lead. I speak confirmation over the things you have sensed deep within yourself, even when visible evidence seemed absent. That confirmation does not belong only to some future moment. It is present now. The truth of what God has been doing has not been delayed by appearances. You are the one this message has been speaking to. The movement taking place on your behalf is already underway. From where you stand, it may still feel like pressure, uncertainty, and an urgency you cannot fully explain. But from a higher perspective, it looks like arrival.